Hi friends, your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, and narrative. And we're going to talk about the two turning wheels of purpose on narrative and what players can accomplish with Dungeons & Dragons. Okay. All right. So, what is the purpose of a narrative? What is the purpose of a story? So we tell stories in lots of different um, ways, right? We tell stories in novels, we tell stories in movies, we tell stories with tabletop role-playing games. We also tell stories with video games, right? And each one of these, I believe, really uses stories in very different ways. And it's not just me saying that. Recently, one of the discussions on the internet has been cutaways in tabletop role-playing games. So one of the things that's unique about tabletop role-playing games is, as it was originally designed, you never cut away from the player characters. The player characters are the center of the story, and we only see the world through their eyes, even though things could be happening elsewhere that don't that the player that will affect the players later or affect them tangentially, right? So there's been this big discussion about should dungeon masters start to use cutaways and say, okay, we're going to take 10 minutes and I'm going to show you the villain's lair and show you their plans, right? You're like, well, how could you possibly do that? Then the players would know. Well, some of the dungeon masters are like, well, I trust that my players can split player knowledge from player character knowledge, right? And so they trust them, and they're saying, you're still going to make decisions as your player character the way they would make decisions, even though you know certain things, right? So that's a massively different. That's a different function between, and they use cutaways in novels and on the big screen, and they use cutaways in video games, but generally we haven't used cut-ins for the first 50 years of TTRPGs, especially Dungeons & Dragons. So, okay, so you have that going on. Then there's the question of what is the purpose of the narrative itself? Is it to educate? Is it to entertain? Uh, you know, or yeah. And so, like, for instance, I recently saw the movie Weapons. No spoilers here, but I don't go to horror movies to be entertained, right? Or I don't really find it fun, but I do find it educating. And, like, for instance, I have an interest in the occult. I want to know about it, but I can't study it directly. That's way too dangerous, right? And I can't control when it's going to come up in the Bible or when it's going to come up at the pulpit. So, and the horror movies that are biblically accurate are almost never written by someone who is a Christian. So it's really unique. So that narrative serves a different purpose. It serves to educate rather than to entertain, right? So with all this, so what is the purpose of a narrative? That's one wheel, and that spins, right? And it's going to be spun by the person who's creating it, and it can also be spun by the person who's experiencing it, the narrative, right? But what do we do with players when they sit down to the Dungeons & Dragons Dungeons & Dragons table? What can they accomplish? And I believe, and I've been thought about this deeply, and I believe it's three things. They can improve self, or they can improve other, or they can make a memorable story. So the three purposes are improve self, improve other, make a memorable, and then last one is memorable story. Okay, you're like, well, why can't they just do all of them? And I do believe you cannot do all of them. If you try to do all of them, you will accomplish nothing. And also, I do want to say all three of these, I think these are the correct uses of Dungeons & Dragons. However, the vast majority of people believe none of those are the case, that the only point is to have fun. And actually, I call it the tyranny of fun. They said this for years, where they were like, if you're having fun, you're doing it right, and every table's different. There's no good or bad, and which I think is utter nonsense. There is a good way to run Dungeons & Dragons. There's a bad way to run Dungeons & Dragons. And I think, it's ludicrous to even say that, because if that's not true, why are there 1,000 channels giving advice on how to build player characters, how to build, what's the best ranger build, right? And then also, there's so much advice for experienced dungeon masters and new dungeon masters. But if there's no right or wrong, why, right? And the reason why is there is absolutely a right or wrong. And the point, and the other thing is, if the purpose of Dungeons and Dragons is to have fun, that doesn't make sense either, right? There's so, like, if you want to have fun, go play Legend of Zelda, right? Like, what does it take to play Legends of Zelda? Nothing. You literally just sit down, start playing. When you get stuck, you click on a YouTube that literally shows you how to beat it, right? That's super fun with no prep, right? Whereas with Dungeons and Dragons, it's 1,150 pages of reading just to start, right? The complexity of it is so outrageously high that new players really struggle to even do it correctly, right? You'll constantly be hearing, oh, just play a fighter. I know you want to play a wizard, but it's too complicated for you at the beginning. You're not going to be able to. How many spell slots do you have? How many spells known do you have? How many of those spells can you cast today? Did you burn that spell slot? It's outrageously complicated. The idea that Dungeons and Dragons was ever built for fun is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous because it's not fun. It's very complicated, right? And it requires massive investment, right? Whereas any video game, you can just pick it up and play, right? Truly fun, right? And you're never going to need to worry, am I going to improve myself with this video game? Am I going to improve someone else with this video game? Am I going to make a memorable story? You don't have to worry about any of that, right? All you're going to do is have fun. You're never going to improve yourself playing a video game. You're never going to improve anybody else playing a video game. And you certainly aren't going to make a memorable story playing a video game, right? So, yeah, so that's the point of this video today, is to simply call out, right, the three purposes that a player can achieve when they go to D&D. Improve self, improve others at the table, right? And then also by extension beyond the table. And then third is make a memorable story, right? And that's been done once. I think one group has made a memorable story with Dungeons and Dragons that is known worldwide. Every single word you just heard in this video is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.